Hello, and welcome to the Sleepless Scientist, a small, quiet corner of the cosmos where wonder moves softly through your thoughts and curiosity learns that it doesn't need to hurry to be profound. I'm truly glad you found your way here, whether you're curled beneath the covers, sinking into the couch, or simply letting your body unwind after another long, uneven day we call living. You're in gentle company. Tonight, we'll take a slow, drifting walk through something quietly extraordinary, something you carry with you at every moment, yet almost never glimpse directly. This evening is about you and the strange, intricate world your mind creates for you every second. But not you in the usual sense, not your favourite colours, not your name, not even your thoughts as you know them. We'll wander a little deeper into the machinery and mystery of perception itself, how your brain builds the thing you call reality, how it decides what feels true, and why what you experience may not be a perfect photograph of the outside world, but rather a story, shimmering, shifting, shaped gently by memory, sensation, emotion, and imagination. And somehow, despite all that filtering and dreaming, it's still beautifully, unmistakably real. Before we begin this quiet journey through the mind's private cinema, I'd love if you'd take a moment to like this video and subscribe, only if these calm explorations bring you comfort, insight, or a little reminder that science too can whisper softly. And when you're ready, I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. It's always a quiet joy to see how far this constellation of listeners stretches, each of us scattered across the night, yet sharing the same small moment of wonder. And don't worry about staying alert or remembering every word. If your thoughts drift away, if your eyelids grow heavy, or if you lose track of where we were, that's perfectly all right. That's how this is meant to be. This isn't a lecture, it's a gentle unravelling, a low tide of thought you can simply float within. Let it wash over you. The story will wait. So, let's begin with something so ordinary, it almost hides in plain sight. Take a look around the room, or if your eyes are already closing, picture the last space you saw. Maybe a lamp, a chair, a familiar ceiling, a phone screen still glowing. You feel certain you saw it all, that your eyes opened, and the world walked in like a guest. But the truth is, that wasn't the world. That was your brain's version of it. And this version, it's not a static photograph. It's not even a movie reel. It's more like a dream you keep waking into. A constructed, constantly updated hallucination. One that just happens to align with what we call the outside world. Most of the time. When you see a colour, you're not absorbing the colour itself. You're receiving photons, tiny packets of light, and your brain is assigning meaning to them, often shaped by your culture, your past experiences, and even your current mood. When you hear a sound, you don't just register a vibration. Your brain gives it shape, maybe a footstep, a voice, a bird, or something else entirely, depending on where you are and what you expect. That's the trick. Your brain doesn't wait to see what's out there. It guesses. Every moment of your waking life, your mind is running ahead of reality, whispering, I think I know what's next. And most of the time, it's right, or close enough. And when it's not, well, that's when the curtain twitches, and you catch a glimpse of just how strange the performance really is. Have you ever seen something out of the corner of your eye and sworn it was a person? Only to realise it was just a coat draped over a chair, or maybe your phone vibrated in your pocket. But when you checked, nothing was there. Those are tiny glitches, not in the world, but in the model your brain has built of it. Your brain filled in the gaps based on what usually happens. And sometimes, it's a little too eager. This isn't a flaw, it's how you survive. Your brain is in the business of being fast and functional, not perfectly accurate. It evolved to make the best possible guess in the shortest possible time, even if that means occasionally mistaking a leaf for a lizard, or an old memory for something that just happened yesterday. What's most curious is this: you rarely notice. The illusion is so seamless, so intimate, that it doesn't feel like an illusion at all. But that's what makes it beautiful. You're not a passive observer, you are a painter, a narrator, a simulator, all at once. Reality as you experience it is not what's out there, it's what your brain says is out there. And this constructed world isn't just about light and sound, it includes time, identity, memory, pain, meaning, love. Every thought, every emotion, every story you tell yourself, all a part of this inner version of the world. It's not fake, it's just yours. And tonight we'll gently pull back the curtain on how your mind builds it. Piece by piece, sense by sense, dream by dream, we'll meet the illusions that make sight possible, the mistakes that give memory its power, the stories your mind tells you when you're asleep, and the quiet mystery of how it all comes together to create a you, however fleeting, however real. So feel free to let go now. Let the outside world fade, just a little. Let the light grow dim. Let your thoughts wander toward that peaceful, half-formed edge between waking and dreaming. Because whether you're fully awake, nearly asleep, or somewhere in between, your mind is still building, still imagining, still whispering its version of the world, and that's where our journey begins. Let's begin with the sense you likely trust the most: sight. It feels immediate, doesn't it? Like a full-screen experience, vibrant, clear, rich with detail. You look and you believe you see. The room, the colours, the edges, the faces, all of it appears to be delivered directly into your awareness, like a perfect image projected onto the back of your mind. But that isn't what's happening. You're not receiving reality. You're receiving signals, limited, filtered, and often incomplete. And what you think you see is not a copy of the world, but your brain's best guess at what's out there. The truth is, you see through a keyhole, and your mind, so quietly and confidently, fills in the rest. Imagine standing in a fog, holding a flashlight. What you can see is small, what you think you see is much bigger, and the difference between those two things, that's the space where your brain paints reality. Let's start with something small, or something you live with every second, the blind spot in your vision. There's a place in each eye where the optic nerve leaves the retina. It has no photoreceptors, no light is registered there. It's a hole in your visual world. But unless you've done the experiment, you've likely never noticed. Why? Because your brain quietly fills it in, with nearby textures, colours, or imagined background. You're looking at a broken image, and your mind stitches it together like a skilled seamstress working in secret. That's not just clever, it's revealing. It shows that your brain doesn't just receive visual input, it interprets, smooths, and invents to create something that feels whole. Now think about colour. The colours you see are not properties of the world, they're interpretations. When light enters your eye, it stimulates cells tuned to certain wavelengths. But what you experience, blue, red, golden, pale green, is a constructed perception, not a physical property out there waiting to be collected. What's more, two people might look at the same thing and experience it differently. Perhaps you remember that infamous photo of the dress. Blue and black to some, white and gold to others. It wasn't a trick of the image, it was a trick of the brain, each person's visual system interpreting the lighting and shading based on subconscious assumptions about the environment. Your brain wants coherence, not accuracy. Let's go a little deeper. Have you ever looked at something that appears to be moving but isn't? Perhaps a pattern on the floor, or one of those spinning illusions where the image seems to swirl endlessly even though it's still. That's not your eyes malfunctioning. That's your brain trying to resolve conflicting information, edges, shadows, contrasts, and creating motion where there is none. It's not an error. It's an educated guess gone slightly awry. These illusions aren't rare exceptions. They're gentle reminders of how visual perception actually works. You're not a camera, you're not recording the world, you're building a model of it, a model made from fragments and hypotheses and sensory whispers. Even depth, the solid sense of near and far, isn't something you see directly, it's a calculation. Your brain compares images from both eyes, looks at motion, shadows, overlaps and experience, and tells you that one object is behind another. It feels instant, but it's the result of many tiny predictions all working together. This also means you can be fooled. Visual completion, the way your brain fills in missing edges or shapes, can make you see faces in clouds, animals in wood grain, or hidden images in magic eye posters. That's called pareidolia, a fancy name for something very human. We are wired to find meaning in visual chaos, to see the familiar in the unfamiliar. Your brain would rather invent a face where none exists than risk missing one that does. And in a way that's comforting. Your brain is not a detached observer. It's your protector, your translator, your interpreter. It doesn't wait passively for the world to arrive. It tries to get ahead, to guess what's coming, to make things make sense, to ensure that the version of reality you live in is useful, if not entirely accurate. So when you look around your room now, whether your eyes are open or gently closed, remember that what you're experiencing is not just what's there, it's what your brain believes is there. The softness of the pillow, the outline of the ceiling, the flicker of movement at the edge of vision. All of these are pieces of a mental construction, constantly updated, occasionally mistaken, and usually just accurate enough. Reality as you see it isn't flat or fixed, it's dynamic. It's a sketch that keeps redrawing itself as new information comes in. Sometimes the sketch is smooth, sometimes it stutters, and sometimes if you pause long enough to notice, you can feel the seams. Like watching a movie frame by frame, and realizing it's just still images stitched together by belief. That's what vision is, not a mirror, but a mosaic. And the world your eyes show you, that's only the beginning of the story your brain is telling. If vision begins as an illusion, then perception is the magic trick we believe in every moment. The previous session explored how sight isn't just the light entering your eyes. It's the mind filling in what's missing, painting coherence over gaps. But what if your brain does more than just fill in holes? What if it actually leads the way, not by waiting for the world to arrive, but by predicting what will happen next? This is the quiet truth beneath nearly every waking moment. Your brain is guessing. Long before a sound reaches your ears or an image reaches your eyes, your brain is already preparing, predicting, assuming. You're not sitting in the passenger seat of perception, you're at the wheel, steering slightly in advance, correcting course only when the world proves you wrong. This idea is known in neuroscience as predictive processing, a soft-sounding phrase that hides a beautifully strange idea that perception isn't passive, it's proactive, and sensation, that's not your primary input. It's your brain's way of adjusting the story when its expectations aren't quite right. Let's take a simple example. Have you ever thought you felt your phone vibrate in your pocket, only to pull it out and discover nothing happened at all? That sensation wasn't caused by your phone, it was caused by your brain expecting it. Based on countless previous experiences, your mind predicted a buzz. It expected a message, a notification, a touch. And that expectation was so vivid, so normal, so likely, that your brain filled in the feeling for you without waiting for confirmation. It told your body, yes, that was probably a buzz, even if there wasn't one. Now zoom out. That same mechanism of guessing first and sensing later is happening constantly. It governs how you hear, how you touch, how you see the world. When you walk through your home in the dark, you don't carefully analyze every step. You already know where the walls are. You know where the table should be. Your brain runs a model of the space, fills in the rest, and only alerts you when something doesn't match. like when your shin unexpectedly meets the corner of a low cabinet. It's the difference between watching a live orchestra and imagining one. Most of the time, you're hearing the imagined performance your brain expects, only occasionally interrupted when an instrument plays something surprising, off-key or new. Even your eyes, which seem like reliable observers, aren't simply sending images to your brain like cameras. Instead, they are error detectors. They help your brain spot the moments when reality doesn't match the prediction. Most of what you see was already assumed. Your eyes are just there to check for surprises. This might sound strange at first, but it actually makes a lot of sense. The world is full of information, far more than your brain can process in real time. So it doesn't try to process everything. It cheats. It guesses. It uses past experiences, patterns, memories, and context to generate a likely version of what's happening. And only when something unexpected breaks the model, a sudden noise, an unfamiliar object, a shift in light, does your brain pause, take a closer look, and adjust the story. This is how you can hear your name in a crowded room even when no one said it, or how you can swear someone called you, only to find silence. That's pareidolia again, your brain's fondness for pattern, but this time applied not to vision, but to sound. You've heard your name so often, in so many voices, from so many places, that your brain is always half listening for it. Like a lighthouse sweeping the dark, ready to light up the moment a familiar shape appears on the horizon. It's also how you might see faces in electrical outlets, animals in clouds, or shapes in shadows. Your brain is tuned to expect familiar forms. It's not waiting to be shown. It's actively looking to complete the world. Imagine walking through a misty forest. The trees are partially obscured. You catch a shape between the branches, and for a split second, it looks like someone's standing there. Your heart might skip a beat. Then you realize it's just a trick of light and leaves. But in that moment, your brain jumped ahead, filling in what made sense. A human figure, a possibility. That prediction wasn't a mistake. It was a defense mechanism. Better to expect something that isn't there than miss something that is. And yet, this system of prediction isn't just about safety or speed. It's what makes the world feel stable. It's why your coffee mug looks the same each morning. Why your bedroom seems familiar even when it's lit differently. Why you don't have to relearn how to use a spoon every day. The brain's guesses are what make life livable, and when they go wrong, they remind you just how much of your reality is imagined, even when it's accurate. There's a kind of poetry in this, that your reality is built on assumptions, that everything you see, hear, and feel is, in a sense, a draft, a sketch, a suggestion. Most of the time, the world matches the prediction, and you glide through life with barely a ripple. But every so often, something breaks the pattern. And in that instant, you catch a glimpse of the scaffolding behind the illusion, the quiet machinery of the mind that runs just beneath awareness. You don't see with your eyes, you see with your mind. The eyes help, of course, but it's the brain that constructs, corrects, and completes the picture. And when you begin to understand that, gently, without fear, you also begin to appreciate just how flexible, how adaptable, and how beautifully strange your inner world really is. Let's imagine, for a moment, that you're in a theatre. Not a crowded one, just a quiet stage in your mind. The lights are low, and one single spotlight drifts across the stage, slowly illuminating one actor at a time. The rest of the stage, all the props, costumes, background dancers, fades into shadow, barely seen at all. That spotlight, it's your attention, and everything outside of it. That's the part of reality your brain quietly decides you don't need to know right now. Because here's the surprising truth. You do not take in the whole world at once, not even close. Even though your eyes are open and scanning your environment constantly, and your ears are collecting layers of sound, and your skin is brushing against fabrics and air, your brain is choosing every moment, choosing what matters and what can be left in the background. You're not experiencing everything, you're experiencing just enough. This selection process is not lazy. It's survival. Your brain is bombarded with information, far more than it could possibly process in real time. Light from every direction, sound bouncing off walls, smells drifting through the air, the slight discomfort in your left sock, the hum of a light fixture, the memory that's just on the edge of coming back. To take all of it in fully would be overwhelming, even paralyzing. So instead, your mind narrows the beam, it focuses, it filters, and you feel as though you're seeing the whole room, even when you're not. Take change blindness, for example. This is a phenomenon where people fail to notice large, even obvious changes in their environment when their attention is elsewhere. In one famous experiment, a man giving directions to a stranger is briefly interrupted by two people walking between them carrying a door. During that split second, the original man is swapped out with someone entirely different. And yet, many participants never notice. They continue the conversation, unaware that the person they're speaking to has changed. It's not because they're unobservant. It's because their attention was engaged with the task, giving directions, not with storing and analysing every detail of the person in front of them. The brain assumed, reasonably, that the scene was stable, that nothing important had shifted. So it filled in continuity, like a film editor smoothing over a cut. A similar effect is called inattentional blindness. This is where something perfectly visible, even obvious, goes completely unnoticed because attention is elsewhere. You may have seen the classic demonstration. A group of people pass basketballs back and forth, and you're asked to count how many passes are made by those in white shirts. Most people focus intently on the ball, on counting, on watching the movement. And because of that narrow focus, they completely miss the person in a gorilla suit who walks into the middle of the scene, beats their chest and walks off stage. The gorilla wasn't hidden, it wasn't subtle, it just wasn't expected, and it wasn't where the spotlight of attention was aimed. These examples may sound extreme, but they reveal a core truth. What you perceive is shaped not just by your senses, but by where you place your mental gaze. And even that gaze isn't entirely yours to direct. It's guided by patterns, emotion, memory, and relevance. Your brain is not just looking, it's looking for something. And what doesn't match the current goal, it fades away. This can be comforting too. In a noisy world, your mind is trying to help you. It is saying, focus on what matters now. Let the rest be quiet. But it also means that your conscious experience, what feels like the complete picture, is really more like a curated slideshow. What you see is selected, enhanced, sometimes even imagined. The full painting is never shown, only the portion you need to get by. That's why you can read a page of a book and realise you have no idea what it said. Your eyes scanned the words, but your attention was elsewhere. Maybe replaying a conversation, or wondering what time it is, or drifting gently towards sleep. That's also why we miss the sound of our own breathing, the pressure of the chair beneath us, or the temperature in the room, until someone points them out, and suddenly they're all you can notice. In that way, attention acts not just as a spotlight, but as a kind of editor, deciding what goes into the story of your current moment and what is left on the cutting room floor. This also explains why two people can share the same physical space, see the same event, and come away with entirely different memories. They weren't being dishonest. They were simply attending to different things. Their internal spotlights were aimed in different directions. And what they didn't notice, for them, it never existed. It's humbling in a quiet way. To realise that reality, the one we feel so sure of, is incomplete by design. Not because we are flawed, but because the world is too much, and we are built to handle just enough. Your attention is precious. It is limited. It cannot shine everywhere at once, and that's okay. Because sometimes missing the gorilla in the room is what allows you to notice the smile on a loved one's face, to catch the rhythm of a breeze, to find stillness in a world that is always moving. So next time you think you're seeing it all, take a moment. Remember the theatre. Remember the spotlight. And remember that most of the stage is in shadow, not because it's unimportant, but because your mind has gently, lovingly decided to let it rest. Let's begin with something simple, or at least something that feels simple. You are you. You've always been you, haven't you? The voice in your mind, the one listening to this right now, it seems constant. Even when your thoughts wander, even when your mood shifts, there's a sense that something steady remains behind the curtain, a central presence, a watcher, a self. But when we look gently, not forcefully, not with harsh skepticism, but with quiet curiosity, that feeling of constancy begins to shimmer a little, and what we find is something more surprising and somehow more beautiful. There is no single you inside your brain. There is no captain at the helm, no glowing orb of identity floating in the centre of your skull. Instead, the self, this thing that feels so whole, so coherent, is an emergent process. A performance created by countless neural systems, all working together, not always in harmony, and rarely with a full script. In the background of your mind, certain regions light up whenever you think about yourself, when you recall your name, your face, a recent embarrassment, or a private hope. Neuroscientists call this collection of brain areas the default mode network, or DMN for short. It's most active when you're not focused on the outside world, when you're daydreaming, remembering, reflecting, or imagining what someone else might be thinking about you. It's the hum of your inner monologue, the quiet engine behind your wandering thoughts. But even the DMN isn't a single thing. It's a set of circuits, dispersed, flexible, and often in conversation with other systems like the emotional centres in the limbic brain or the sensory integration areas in the cortex. Together, these parts create the experience of you as a continuing thread, a main character who moves through time, makes decisions and owns their thoughts. Still, that thread is more like a narrative than a fact. Your sense of self is a story, one you revise constantly, one shaped by memory, emotion, culture, and imagination. You're not simply recalling who you are, you're actively constructing it. Take a moment to think about who you were 10 years ago, the way you dressed, the way you spoke, what you believed to be true about the world. Chances are that person feels familiar, but also slightly distant. They are you, but also not quite. Maybe you smile at their optimism. Maybe you cringe at their choices. Maybe you wish you could reassure them, or shake them, or simply sit beside them for a while. That's because you is not a fixed thing. It's a river. It flows, bends, erodes, and reshapes its banks with each passing year. And every time you remember your past, you do so from the perspective of now, casting new meaning onto old events, retelling your life like a novel edited in real time. The voice in your mind, the one narrating this very moment, is doing more than describing. It's justifying, it's organising, it's smoothing out the messiness of internal experience into something that feels coherent, even when it isn't. When you make a mistake and explain it to yourself, I was just tired, or that wasn't like me, you're not just reporting your thoughts, you're building a version of yourself that makes sense, one that fits with your past and aligns with your future. This isn't deception, it's maintenance. It's the way your brain keeps the identity ship sailing, even when the winds shift or the compass wobbles. And this process is vital. Without it, you would feel scattered, like a series of unrelated moments rather than a continuous presence. You'd wake up each day a stranger to yourself. So instead, your mind works behind the scenes, weaving together experiences, habits, values, preferences, and dreams into something that feels solid. But solidity here is a feeling, not a structure, and that's okay. In fact, it's freeing. Because if the self is a story, not a statue, then it can evolve. You can grow without betraying who you were. You can soften without losing your strength. You can change your mind without breaking apart. You're not a fixed point. You're a moving pattern. Even in silence, even in sleep, that pattern continues, adjusting, balancing, carrying forward the subtle texture of who you are. And when you speak again, or remember, or reflect, that self returns. Sometimes a little different, sometimes exactly the same, always made fresh by the moment. You're not the thoughts you had yesterday, but you are the thread that connects them. And in that thread, delicate, flexible, often invisible, lies the quiet power of being. So if you've ever wondered why you feel different in different situations, if you've ever surprised yourself with a reaction you didn't expect, or felt like a stranger to your own reflection on a particularly tired morning, know this: it doesn't mean you're broken, it means you're alive. Because the self is not a destination, it's a path, and you're walking it, even now, even here, through thought, through breath, through this gentle moment of listening. We like to think of ourselves as singular, one mind, one will, one voice inside our head that speaks for all of us, rational, unified, aware, but sometimes the brain reveals its secrets not through clarity, but through its fractures. And when those rare fractures appear, in experiments, in injuries, in moments of stillness, we begin to glimpse the strange truth behind the curtain. There is not one you. There are many systems, all working together and sometimes working alone, to create the impression of one continuous person. In the mid-20th century, doctors performed a radical procedure on patients suffering from severe epilepsy. They severed the corpus callosum, the thick bundle of nerve fibers that connects the brain's left and right hemispheres. The result was startling, not because it damaged cognition, but because it quietly revealed how divided the brain can be beneath the surface. These split-brain patients could walk, talk, think, and interact almost normally. But when researchers designed special experiments, ones that showed information to only one side of the brain, something strange happened. Each hemisphere began to act as if it had its own separate awareness. For instance, the left hemisphere typically controls language in most people. So when researchers showed a word to the right visual field, which is processed by the left hemisphere, the patient could say what they saw. Apple, they might say, or tree. But if the word appeared in the left visual field, processed by the right hemisphere, the patient would say, I didn't see anything. And yet their left hand, controlled by the right hemisphere, could still draw it. An apple, a tree, a match to the unseen word. One part of the brain knew, the other didn't, and neither part seemed aware of the gap. In another experiment, a split-brain patient was shown two images simultaneously, one to each hemisphere. The left brain saw a chicken claw, the right brain saw a snowy landscape. Then the patient was asked to choose a related image from an array of pictures. The right hand, controlled by the left brain, pointed to a chicken. The left hand, controlled by the right brain, pointed to a snow shovel. When asked to explain both choices, the patient said something like, "Oh, I picked the chicken because of the claw. And the shovel, well, you need to clean out the chicken coop." That explanation was a fabrication, a confabulation. The left hemisphere, lacking access to the snowy image seen only by the right hemisphere, didn't know why the left hand chose a shovel. But it created a reason anyway. It didn't say, I don't know. It said, here's why I did that. The brain, even when unsure, acts as if it's certain, stitching a narrative to keep the illusion of a single unified self intact. This tendency is so consistent that researchers began referring to the left hemisphere's narrative abilities as the interpreter. It's a mental module whose job is not necessarily to tell the truth, but to maintain coherence, to make sure the story of you continues smoothly, even when the facts don't line up. And it turns out, we all have this interpreter running in the background. You've likely felt it before. You trip on a curb and instantly mutter, "That sidewalk's uneven." You pick up the wrong item at the store and say, "Oh, I meant to try this one instead." You choose something on impulse and later convince yourself it was a deeply thought out decision. None of this makes you dishonest. It makes you human. Your mind retroactively applies meaning to keep your actions in line with your imagined self. Because to admit you don't know why you did something, or that different parts of you wanted different things, would break the story. And the story is what keeps us anchored. This quiet illusion of unity is comforting. But it also reminds us to approach ourselves with humility. You're not a single voice. You're a collection of processes, sensations, instincts, habits, and memories, held together by attention, shaped by language, and interpreted by something that really wants life to make sense. And yet, the seams do show. In dreams, for example, the characters you meet can surprise you, argue with you, even deceive you. Where do they come from, if you are the dreamer? If you've ever talked yourself out of doing something, or talked yourself into something, you've likely felt those parts of your mind negotiating behind the scenes. Sometimes you're the actor, sometimes the audience, sometimes both. And it's not only in pathology or dreams. Consider muscle memory, how your fingers can type a password even when your mind goes blank, or how your body reacts before your brain catches up. In those moments, parts of you know things, other parts don't. There is intelligence in your reflexes, in your instincts, in your nonverbal knowing. None of this diminishes your identity, it enriches it. The self is not a singular flame, but a constellation, a network of flickering lights that form a picture only when seen from the right distance. Sometimes the lights dim, sometimes they blink out, but the pattern remains, fluid, self-correcting, always trying to make sense of itself. So when you feel conflicted, when you can't explain a decision, when a part of you speaks while another part stays quiet, that's not failure. That's the orchestra tuning itself in real time. And if the left brain occasionally writes a line the right one didn't intend, maybe that's just the price of having a story at all. Because the alternative, silence, fragmentation, incomprehensibility, would be far more difficult to carry. And so the narrator continues, editing, justifying, dreaming up reasons after the fact, not to deceive you, but to comfort you, to keep you together. And now, perhaps more than ever, that feels like a gift. Close your eyes, if they aren't already, and call up a memory. Any memory. Something warm, maybe. A birthday from long ago, a summer afternoon, a kitchen filled with the scent of something familiar. Let the image unfold in your mind, the light, the sounds, the people. It probably feels vivid, real, like you've just plucked a scene straight from the reel of your life and held it to the light. But what if I told you that memory may not have happened quite that way? What you recall, in all its colour and shape and emotional weight, isn't a recording, it's a reconstruction. Your brain is not a librarian pulling out a dusty book. It's more like a theatre director restaging a play from scattered notes, old costumes, and whatever actors happen to show up that day. The scene you remember feels whole, but each time you recall it, you're building it again from fragments, and sometimes from fiction. This may sound unsettling, but it's actually how memory is meant to work. In the 1970s, a cognitive psychologist named Elizabeth Loftus began to explore just how fragile our memories really are. In a series of now famous experiments, she showed participants short videos of car accidents and then asked questions like, how fast were the cars going when they hit each other? But when she changed just one word, hit to smashed, people remembered the cars going faster. They even recalled details that weren't in the video at all, like broken glass. Their memory of the event had been subtly edited, not by force, but by the gentle suggestion of a word. Later studies pushed this further. Participants were shown doctored photos of themselves on a hot air balloon ride, an event that never happened. After some time, many of them recalled details of the trip. Not just vague acceptance, but elaborate emotional recollections, what they wore, how they felt, what the sky looked like. These weren't lies, they were memories. False, but felt as true. It doesn't take hypnosis or deception for memories to change. It happens all the time, through retelling, through reflection, through hearing others' versions. Childhood memories are especially vulnerable. What you remember from when you were 3 years old may actually be a blend of photographs, family stories, and your own imagination gently stitching the past into something that fits. Even eyewitness accounts, which we tend to treat as gold standards in courts of law, are astonishingly unreliable. Studies have shown again and again that people can misidentify faces, alter timelines, or be influenced by how a question is asked. The more certain a witness feels, the more vivid the memory seems. And yet, confidence often has little correlation with accuracy. Why would the brain, this marvel of biology, allow for such imprecision? Because memory isn't a tool for perfect recall. It's a tool for useful recall. You don't need to remember every detail of every day, just enough to guide your choices, preserve your relationships, and maintain your sense of who you are. And so, your mind smooths the rough edges. It rounds the corners. It merges similar events, replaces faces with clearer ones, adds colour to dull moments, and fades the things that hurt too much. In a way, memory is closer to storytelling than archiving. Each time you remember something, you're also editing it, reinforcing certain details, weakening others, reshaping the emotional tone based on who you are now. Let's say you once had a falling out with a friend. At the time, you may have blamed them entirely. A few years later, with more distance, you recall it differently. You see your own role more clearly, perhaps even forgive them in your memory. That's not just a change in opinion, it's a change in the memory itself. The recollection has evolved with you. Think of memory as a soft clay sculpture, not a stone statue. Each time you handle it, it picks up new impressions. The warmth of your hands, the pressure of recent experiences, the fingerprints of your present self. And as it changes, you don't notice the edits. You just feel the weight of continuity, of a life that makes sense. This is not a flaw, it's a feature. If you remembered everything with perfect fidelity, every argument, every awkward pause, every detail of every day, it would be overwhelming. You'd be lost in the noise. But by distilling the past into emotionally relevant, narrative-shaped moments, your brain gives you something usable, not true in the historical sense perhaps, but true in the emotional one. That memory of the summer afternoon. It may have rained that day. The kitchen might have smelled like something else. The person you remember smiling at you may not have been there at all, but the feeling of warmth, of belonging, that part may be real, and that's what your brain kept, not the details, the meaning. So if your memories shift over time, if someone else recalls it differently, if the picture in your mind softens or sharpens without warning, that's not evidence of deceit. It's evidence of being human. Because memory is not a mirror, it's a mosaic. And each time you remember, you're not just looking back, you're also recreating the past in the image of who you are now. When we think of memory, we often imagine a vault, a place where our past is kept safe, organised, and unchanged. We picture it as a vast library, maybe dusty, but stable. We assume that once something has happened, it's been stored, etched, labelled, and available for retrieval. But this isn't how the mind works, not really. Because memory's main purpose isn't to preserve the past, it's to help you live in the present. If that sounds strange, consider this. What would be the use of remembering every single detail of your life if none of it helped you now? The exact shape of a leaf you saw in 3rd grade, the socks you wore on a Tuesday last April. Your brain could try to hold it all, but it would come at the cost of focus, flexibility, and emotional health. So instead, your brain makes a trade. It sacrifices perfect accuracy in order to preserve meaning, coherence, and adaptability. It edits constantly, not to mislead you, but to help you. Every time you recall a memory, really recall it, feel it, pull it into the present, your brain is not simply playing back a file, it's reopening it. And as it does, it reshapes that memory slightly, based on your current mood, your beliefs, your emotional needs. Then, once you're done reflecting, your mind resaves it. Slightly different, slightly updated. Like a living document being reworked in silence, always in motion behind your awareness. This process is called reconsolidation, and it's one of the reasons memory is so malleable. Neuroscientists have found that just bringing a memory into consciousness makes it vulnerable to change, even subtle change. A detail added, a feeling softened, a new conclusion drawn, and once it's reconsolidated, the original is gone. Not replaced with a lie, but overwritten with something that now feels even more true, because it reflects who you are today. This is part of why people often remember painful events differently as they heal. In the immediate aftermath of loss, a memory may be raw, unfiltered, jagged with grief. But over time, as the wound begins to close, the memory reshapes itself. The sharp edges round off. Bitterness gives way to gratitude. You might remember the same person, the same place, the same moment, but now through a different lens. And that's memory's real job. Not to preserve, but to serve. To update your internal world so it can better match the one you live in. To help you stay whole, even when life is not. This isn't just emotional, it's biological. Your memories are physically encoded in your brain, in networks of neurons that strengthen and weaken over time. The ones you use more often tend to become stronger. The ones you neglect begin to fade. And the act of retrieving a memory can actually reinforce its survival, or reshape it depending on what emotional charge you bring into the moment. That's why therapists sometimes use memory techniques to help with trauma. By recalling painful events in a safe new context, with gentleness, with support, people can, over time, re-encode those memories in a way that no longer overwhelms the nervous system. The event doesn't vanish, but its meaning shifts. Its emotional grip softens. You've probably felt this in everyday life too. Maybe you've told a story so many times about a mistake, a success, a funny moment, that it's become polished, rehearsed. Over time, the way you tell it has become the way you remember it. Even if it started as a bit exaggerated, even if details were changed slightly for humour or clarity, those changes became real. Not because you were lying, but because your brain incorporated the version that worked, the one that gave the moment purpose. Memory is social too. Our recollections are shaped by the people around us, by the way others respond, the way they remind us, the stories they share. We build a shared history with those we love, and sometimes that shared version overwrites our original memory. What matters most is not always the facts, but the shared meaning they carry. None of this means we should stop trusting memory. Rather, it invites us to trust it differently, not as a record of perfect truth, but as a living guide. A mirror that sometimes fogs but still reflects something real. A journal that evolves with its author. There's comfort in this too. If memories can be reshaped, then pain isn't permanent. If the past isn't set in stone, then growth is possible. You can reframe, you can forgive, you can rediscover joy in moments once coloured by sorrow. And sometimes, the act of remembering isn't about accuracy at all. It's about presence. It's about bringing a loved one close again, if only in feeling. About holding a past version of yourself with compassion. About weaving your story not with precision, but with care. So the next time you wonder whether your memory is correct, perhaps ask instead, is it kind? Is it helpful? Does it reflect who I've become? Because the truth is, your brain isn't trying to archive your life like a museum. It's trying to help you live it. It's rewriting as you grow, editing as you change, saving and resaving the past, not to trap you in it, but to carry it with you gently into whatever comes next. As day fades and the world slips beneath the hush of evening, something curious begins to stir behind closed eyes. The lights dim, the body grows heavy, and somewhere in the quiet corridors of the mind, a strange kind of theatre opens its doors. This theatre needs no audience, no rehearsals, no scripts. It does not wait for permission. It simply begins, softly, silently, the moment you drift from waking into sleep. Each night your brain cycles through a complex rhythm of rest. These are the sleep stages, flowing in gentle waves that rise and fall through the dark. There's light sleep where thoughts begin to float, deep sleep where the body sinks into restoration. And then there's something else, a phase unlike the others, a stage where stillness and intensity meet, where the body is paralyzed, yet the brain comes alive. This is REM sleep, rapid eye movement, and it is here that most vivid dreams unfold. During REM, your muscles are gently locked down, a protective quieting that keeps your limbs from acting out the chaos of your imagination. But inside the mind, a different kind of activity flares to life. The visual centers ignite, emotion circuits surge, memory systems echo with fragments of the day. And from this strange blend of biology and mystery, dreams begin to bloom. They're not quiet echoes of real life. They're wild, cinematic, often illogical experiences, filled with emotion, movement, strange transitions, and unexpected guests. You might find yourself back in school, or flying over a coastline you've never seen, or talking with someone long gone, their face both familiar and unfamiliar at once. The rules of reality bend, sometimes break. Yet within the dream, you rarely question them. Why is that? Part of the answer lies in what's not active. During REM sleep, a region of the brain known as the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for rational thought, logic, and impulse control, is unusually quiet. It's as if the editor of your waking mind has stepped away and the storytellers have taken the stage. With no one to interrupt, scenes shift without warning. Doors appear where none were before. Time folds in on itself, and you simply follow along, not as a director, but as a passenger. Yet for all their surrealism, dreams don't feel chaotic while we're inside them. They feel emotionally true. Whether joyful or terrifying, they unfold with a kind of internal coherence. A dream may make little sense to a waking observer, but from within, its emotional logic is persuasive. You don't need to explain why the ocean is in your living room, or why your childhood home is also a train station. It feels right, and that feeling is enough. Sleep scientists have studied this dream architecture in detail. They found that we cycle through sleep stages multiple times each night, with REM periods growing longer toward the morning. The first REM may last only a few minutes. The final one might stretch to nearly an hour. That's why dreams near dawn often feel more elaborate, more vivid, more layered, more likely to linger when you wake. But even before REM begins, the mind prepares. In non-REM sleep, you may experience short, flickering dreamlets, fragments of thought, memory, or sound that hover between wakefulness and the deeper night. These too have a purpose. They may help with memory consolidation, emotional sorting, or simply provide a soft bridge into the more immersive dream world to come. And what a world it is. It's not just a replay of your day, it's a reshuffling, a remix, a collage made of feeling, memory, imagination, and something else. Something quieter, harder to name. A whisper of intuition, a trace of unfinished thought. The dreams you dream are yours alone, but they are also part of something ancient. Every creature that sleeps, from birds to octopuses to humans, seems to pass through a stage like this, where the outside world fades and the inner world becomes the only one that matters. In this sense, dreams may be the oldest form of storytelling. Before language, before writing, before myth, there were dreams, visions that arrived unbidden, stories that stitched themselves together in the dark. They carried warnings, longings, symbols, and secrets, and they still do, even if we no longer see them as messages from gods or ancestors. Today, we see them as reflections, not of a supernatural world, but of our own rich, inner lives. So the next time you slip into sleep, think of your mind not as shutting down, but as shifting scenes. Think of the night as a stage. Think of the dream as the play, and you, both the actor and the audience, watching as the curtain rises on a story written only for you. There's something comforting in that, in knowing that while you rest, something inside you continues to wander, not with a goal perhaps, but with a rhythm, a pattern, a quiet longing to explore. And though the play may end when morning comes, its echoes stay with you, a strange image, a sudden feeling, a phrase you don't remember hearing. They slip into your waking life like fragments of a half-forgotten poem. And maybe, in that half-light between dreaming and waking, you carry a piece of the night theatre with you, just long enough to wonder what it meant. In waking life, stories have rules. They begin, they build, they end. There is cause and effect, characters with names, settings that stay still. But in dreams, stories unravel the moment they begin. They twist and fold, shift characters mid-scene, turn kitchens into oceans and whisper meanings that vanish when you reach for them. And yet, while you're dreaming, it all makes sense. There's a strange kind of coherence to dream logic. You accept the impossible. A mountain grows legs. Your childhood dog tells you something important. You walk through walls without thinking twice. And afterward, in the soft blur of morning, you may feel puzzled. Not because it made no sense, but because it made so much sense at the time. Scientists have long tried to understand why we dream, and why dream narratives feel so meaningful. One early theory, the activation synthesis hypothesis, suggests that dreams begin as noise. During REM sleep, the brainstem sends random signals to the cortex, activating visual and emotional regions. The conscious mind, ever the meaning maker, tries to make sense of this static, to stitch it into a story, even if the pieces don't quite fit. It's like tuning a radio and inventing the lyrics yourself because the signal keeps breaking. But not all dreams are nonsense. In fact, some researchers believe dreams serve a profound purpose, one tied to survival. This is the threat simulation theory, which proposes that dreaming evolved as a kind of rehearsal. In dreams, you face fears, fight enemies, run from danger, not because they're real, but because your brain is preparing you for when they might be. It's low-risk training in a high-stakes world. Think about how often dreams lean towards stress or conflict. You're late for an exam, you can't find your way home, you're being chased. These aren't just echoes of daily anxieties. They might be cognitive drills running silently through your night, sharpening your emotional responses for when they matter most. Still, not every dream is a rehearsal. Some dreams are gardens, lush, surreal, ungoverned by utility. These are the dreams where logic dissolves completely, where time slips and people merge and nothing quite has a name. And it's in these strange places that some of the deepest feelings emerge. Because even when the story makes no sense, the emotion often does. You may wake from a dream you can't describe, and still feel its weight for hours. You may not remember the dream at all, and yet carry a sudden longing, a quiet joy, or a cloud of sadness that trails behind you through the morning. The content disappears, but the feeling lingers. That's the emotional core of dreaming. Not always what happens, but how it feels. This emotional vividness is partly because during dreaming, the limbic system, the emotional center of the brain, is highly active. Meanwhile, as we mentioned earlier, the prefrontal cortex, the seat of logic and planning, is largely offline. The result is a mind driven by emotion, not reason, a mind that can feel intensely without needing to explain. But not all dreamers are passive. Some people, perhaps you, have experienced lucid dreaming, a state where you become aware that you're dreaming, and in some cases can control the dream. This often happens when a tiny crack appears in the dream logic, something odd, like seeing your reflection blink twice, or realizing that the sky is the wrong color. Suddenly the dream shifts. You recognize it for what it is. And then, sometimes, you can steer. Lucid dreams often arise when fragments of the waking prefrontal cortex briefly reactivate. Awareness returns, but the dream continues, a rare meeting between logic and imagination. Some lucid dreamers use this state for creativity. Others use it to face fears, rehearse speeches, or simply explore. Still, even when you're lucid, the dream doesn't follow rules. You may fly, but forget how. You may summon something, only to find it changed when it arrives, because the dream world is slippery. It resists full control, and that, perhaps, is part of its charm. Dreams are not simulations to be solved. They are feelings to be felt. They are stories the mind tells itself when the rest of the world has gone quiet. Why then do dreams so often feel meaningful, even when their pieces are strange or scattered? Part of it is your brain's natural hunger for pattern. You are a meaning-making creature. You seek connection. In life, in memory, and even in sleep. Your mind weaves strands together to find resonance. When you wake, you may not recall the details, but you remember the feeling of something unfinished or something understood. And sometimes meaning doesn't come from clarity. It comes from wonder. A dream need not be logical to leave you changed. It only needs to brush against something tender, a fear, a longing, a memory not yet formed, and remind you that even in sleep, your mind is listening. So as you drift into your next dream, know that it doesn't have to make sense. It only has to be yours. A fleeting poem from the part of you that speaks without words. A story without rules, written in candlelight, performed in silence, and remembered not for what it said, but for how it made you feel. Not all dreams carry fear. Not all dreams are rehearsals or cryptic echoes of stress. Some dreams are light, playful, even radiant, glowing like lanterns beneath the surface of sleep. These are the dreams that make no promises, follow no plans, and yet somehow offer something rare. Creative freedom without judgment. In the dream world, your mind is no longer bound by physics or reason or reputation. You're not limited by what you know. You're not tethered by who you are when awake. And in that unanchored state, the mind begins to play. This is the territory where creativity blooms. Strange, sometimes absurd, but rich with possibility. And while most of what arises in dreams is quickly forgotten or too tangled to make sense, once in a while, something emerges that seems touched by brilliance. Take, for example, the case of Paul McCartney. One morning in 1965, he awoke with a tune in his head. Perfectly formed, haunting, gentle. He rushed to the piano and played it, certain he must have heard it somewhere before, but no one recognized it. It was his. It had come to him in sleep. That melody would become yesterday one of the most recorded songs in history, or the story of Friedrich August Kekulier, a German chemist. He had long puzzled over the structure of benzene, a molecule, with a composition that defied linear diagrams. One night he dreamed of a snake biting its own tail, a loop, a ring. When he woke, the solution was clear. Benzene was not a chain, it was a circle. These are just anecdotes, yes, the kind that live on because they're rare and delightful. But they point to something deeper. The dreaming brain is not just chaotic, it's associative. It connects distant ideas, stirs memories into metaphor, frees the mind from its daytime rails. It does what creativity so often demands. It breaks the usual pattern. When we sleep, especially during REM, certain brain regions become highly active. The visual cortex, the limbic system, the association cortices all spark to life. These are the areas responsible for imagery, emotion, and meaning-making. Meanwhile, the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, the seat of critical reasoning, remains largely quiet. It's a recipe for metaphor without resistance, emotion without censorship, a fertile space where ideas are not filtered but felt. This doesn't mean every dream is profound. Sometimes dreams are nonsense, disconnected fragments, silly scenes with no weight at all, and that too is part of the magic. Because the dreaming mind is not trying to impress anyone. It doesn't need to be correct, it simply is. Some scientists believe this dream state may function like a kind of neural rehearsal space, a mental sandbox where the brain tries out combinations of thoughts, feelings, and scenarios without consequence. In this view, dreams aren't about problem solving in a strict sense, they're about mental flexibility. Just as physical play helps children develop motor skills and social intuition, mental play may help the adult brain stay agile, creative, resilient. There's evidence that dreaming helps with memory integration too. During sleep, especially after emotionally significant experiences, the brain replays, reweaves, and recontextualizes memories. Not just filing them away, but blending them with old experiences, testing their emotional resonance, and embedding them into the ongoing story of who you are. This blending often shows up in dreams. You may visit a place that combines your childhood home with your current job. You may speak with someone who looks like a friend but sounds like your father. These are not errors, they're fusions, symbolic layers created by a brain that is not interested in realism, but in emotional truth. And sometimes that truth is wordless. You wake with a sense of clarity, not because a problem was solved outright, but because something shifted, a feeling resolved, a question softened, a knot in your mind gently undone. The dream might vanish, but the release remains. Dreams can also reflect unspoken wishes, suppressed fears, or unresolved dilemmas. Not in the strict Freudian sense of hidden meaning, not everything's about your childhood or your parents, but in the broader sense that dreams give voice to what is difficult to articulate while awake. This is why dream journaling, though simple, can be powerful. Writing down dreams upon waking helps catch those fragile strands before they fade. Over time, patterns may emerge, recurring themes, emotions, symbols. Not as a puzzle to decode, but as a mirror held up to your evolving inner world. And sometimes, dreaming is simply dreaming. No deep meaning, no hidden insight, just a surreal dance through thought and feeling. Colour and motion, like a painting that never asks to be explained. That too has value. In a waking world driven by outcomes, by productivity, by constant interpretation, the dream is a space where nothing must be earned. You do not have to make sense. You do not have to be productive. You only have to be. Floating through landscapes your mind invents on the spot. Speaking with versions of yourself you didn't know existed. Feeling things that belong to no language at all. So tonight, when you sleep, and you will, let your mind have that space. Let it wander. Let it stumble. Let it play. There is no right way to dream. There is only the dreaming. You've been listening, thinking, drifting. And all the while, something has been quietly happening. Not the words themselves, not the logic they carry, but the experience, that feeling of being here, present, awake, the flicker of thought behind your eyes, the soft awareness that all of this, voice, sound, breath, memory, is happening inside a space that feels like you. But what is that space? What is consciousness? It's a question so close, so obvious, that it slips by unnoticed. You don't ask why red looks red, or why pain hurts, or why a piece of music can make you cry. Not because the answers are clear, but because the experience feels undeniable. And yet, that's exactly where the mystery begins. Consciousness is not just the brain processing data. A thermostat can respond to temperature. A phone can recognize your face, but neither of them feels anything. They respond, but they do not experience. They do not wonder. They do not ask. You do. That difference between function and feeling is what philosophers call the hard problem of consciousness. It was named by David Chalmers, who pointed out that even if we knew exactly how the brain works, every neuron, every chemical, every connection, we still wouldn't know why any of it should feel like anything at all. Why does the act of processing light lead to the experience of colour? Why does the brain's electrical activity produce the taste of tea, the pang of nostalgia, the sound of rain in the dark? These aren't just poetic questions, they're real, scientific ones, and we don't yet have answers. Think of it this way. Your brain is a 3-pound organ made of cells and water and salt. It sits in darkness, sealed away, with no direct access to the world, and yet within that quiet chamber a world appears. You see, feel, imagine, remember. Somehow raw signals, electrical pulses, molecular changes, are translated into vivid personal experience. Not just information, but awareness. You're not simply a machine reading data. You're the warmth behind the reading, the echo behind the thought, the spark of knowing. But what is that spark? We don't know, and yet we try. Some suggest that consciousness is like a spotlight, illuminating certain thoughts, emotions, or perceptions at a time. Others describe it as a stream, constantly flowing, always changing. Still others compare it to a mirror, reflecting the world back to itself, shaped by the curves and edges of your own mind. But perhaps the most helpful metaphor is gentler. You are not the light itself. You are how the light bends, a pattern of reflection and refraction, a moment of clarity in a sea of motion. Because consciousness is not a thing you have, it is something you are. And it's not fixed. It changes from moment to moment. It flickers during dreams, recedes during anesthesia, brightens during moments of focus, dims during fatigue. You felt it before, the shift between truly being present and merely moving through routine, the difference between noticing a sunset and simply walking past it. Your experience of being you is not always the same. It can expand or narrow. It can be quiet or intense. Sometimes you feel more like yourself than others. Sometimes you feel like a collection of echoes, thoughts, and feelings loosely stitched together. And still, something persists. Some quiet core that observes, that feels. What's so beautiful and so strange is that we don't know how this happens. We have mapped the visual cortex, the auditory pathways, the networks that generate speech, movement, memory. But the spark of awareness, that sudden moment when the information becomes experience, that remains unexplained. It's tempting to search for it, to imagine a location in the brain, a special cluster of cells, a hidden control center. But modern neuroscience tells us otherwise. There is no single seat of consciousness, no homunculus behind the eyes pulling levers. What we call consciousness may simply be the integrated activity of many systems, a pattern, not a place. Still, something is different about that pattern. Something makes it feel like you're inside it. And maybe that's enough for now, not to understand it completely, but to stand inside it with quiet awe. Because every experience you've ever had, every memory, sensation, moment of love or loss, happened within this shimmering mystery. You are the witness and the story, the container and the flame. You're not outside of consciousness looking in. You are the space in which it lives. So as you lie here now, listening, breathing, maybe already halfway into sleep, know that this too is part of the wonder, the gentle awareness that you are here, that you're listening, that you're alive. You don't need to explain it, you only need to feel it. So if consciousness is the experience of being, of feeling, sensing, knowing, then how do we begin to describe it? Not just poetically, but scientifically. What sort of architecture could create something so strange, so intimate, so irreducibly personal? Scientists and philosophers have tried, not to solve the mystery entirely, we're still far from that, but to sketch its possible contours. These theories don't claim to explain consciousness in full. They're more like stargazers pointing out constellations in the dark, helpful, suggestive, and humbly incomplete. One such framework is called Integrated Information Theory, or IIT. At its heart is a simple but radical idea. Consciousness arises from systems that are both highly integrated and informationally rich, not just complex, but structured in a way that each part affects the whole. According to IIT, for something to be conscious, it can't just process information. It must do so in a deeply entangled way, where the system's current state constrains its possible past and future states in a unique pattern. You can imagine it like a spider web. Each thread connects to many others. A vibration in one part ripples through the entire structure. In this metaphor, the more connections and internal feedback loops the web has, and the more distinct the overall pattern that results, the more consciousness that system would possess. IIT even proposes a number for this, a value called phi, a kind of mathematical estimate of a system's capacity for integrated experience. The higher the phi, the richer the consciousness. A human brain, with its dense interconnectedness, would have a high phi. A digital camera, which records but doesn't integrate deeply, would have almost none. But IIT is not without its critics. Some argue that while the theory captures something compelling, it's difficult to test. Others worry that it veers into panpsychism, the idea that everything, even very simple systems, may possess a faint glimmer of consciousness. That may sound poetic, but it raises difficult questions. Is a thermostat conscious? A rock? A single photon? So researchers have explored other models, ones that feel more grounded in everyday experience. One such model is called Global Workspace Theory, or GWT. Rather than focusing on integration, GWT begins with a metaphor: the mind as a theatre. Imagine a darkened stage. Around the edges sit dozens of players, different mental processes happening in parallel. Sensations, memories, ideas, urges, each one whispering its lines from the wings. But only one actor at a time stands in the spotlight. Only one process gets to occupy the global workspace, where it becomes available to the rest of the mind. That actor in the spotlight, that thought or perception, becomes what we're aware of. It's the moment a smell becomes noticed, a word becomes meaningful, a decision becomes conscious. Once in the workspace, the content gets broadcast across the brain, to memory, language, emotion, motor control, allowing it to guide behaviour in a coordinated way. In this view, consciousness is not the whole theatre. It's the performance that's briefly being shared, and the rest, all the background processes, remain unconscious, operating silently behind the scenes until it's their turn. What makes this model so powerful is that it mirrors what we experience in real life. You don't perceive everything at once. You focus, you attend. Your mind highlights one moment, one thought, one feeling, then moves to the next. There's a stream, a sequence, a rhythm to attention that matches this theatrical dance of spotlight and shadow. And unlike IIT, global workspace theory is easier to test. Neuroscientists have used brain imaging to observe how certain neural patterns light up across multiple regions during conscious perception, a kind of neural broadcasting that fits the model's predictions. Still, like all models, it's a simplification. It doesn't explain why the broadcasting feels like anything, only that it seems to mark the transition between unconscious processing and conscious awareness, and so, we're left with possibilities, not certainties. Integrated information theory tells us that the structure of a system might give rise to experience. Global workspace theory tells us how experience might be shared and organised once it arises. Other ideas suggest consciousness may emerge from certain kinds of self-referential loops, or from synchronised neural rhythms, or even from entirely unknown principles. But none of these theories have unlocked the final door. There is still a gap, not just between neurons and thoughts, but between computation and qualia, the raw what it feels like of being. You can describe the wavelengths of blue, but not the experience of blueness. You can measure the brain's activity during sadness, but not the ache itself. And perhaps that's what makes the study of consciousness so unusual. It's not just an object to examine, it's the very lens through which we examine. You can't step outside of it. You are it. Which is why, in this part of the journey, we don't rush. We walk slowly. We let the questions stay open, like windows. We let wonder in. Because even if no theory holds the final answer, each one offers a way to look differently, to reflect on what it means to be a self, to be aware, to hold a moment in the soft palm of attention, and say, without knowing how, this is happening. I am here. Close your eyes just for a moment and ask yourself, where exactly is your awareness? Is it behind your eyes, in your chest, in your head, behind the forehead? Is it everywhere or nowhere in particular? Try to find it. It moves, it slips. You focus on your breath and your awareness settles there. A sound draws your attention and suddenly it's somewhere else. You remember something and it shifts inward. Awareness isn't static. It floats, it flickers, it fades and returns like sunlight through wind-blown leaves. That simple observation that you can't pin down where you are reveals something quietly profound. Consciousness is not a location. It is a process. For a long time, people imagined consciousness as residing in a particular spot. Maybe the pineal gland, as Descartes thought, maybe the frontal lobe, maybe the thalamus. And while certain brain regions do play critical roles in supporting awareness, damage to them can alter or erase the experience of being conscious. No single place lights up and says, "Here, this is where you are." Instead, awareness emerges from many regions working together, from patterns, not parts. When you are conscious, your brain is not simply on, it is orchestrated. Waves of electrical activity synchronize across distant regions. Different networks, those involved in sight, emotion, memory, body awareness, begin to resonate together like instruments tuning to the same key. In this harmony, the music of consciousness begins to play, and like music, it is not located in any single note. It exists in the relationship between them. Even more beautifully, this process is dynamic. It's not always the same. When you're deeply focused, reading, creating, solving a problem, consciousness sharpens. When you're daydreaming or falling asleep, it becomes diffuse. When you're under anesthesia, it may vanish almost entirely, though your brain continues to hum along. Studies show that under anesthesia or in deep non-REM sleep, the communication between brain regions weakens. The networks that support integration go quiet. In those moments, experience itself seems to fade, and yet, when you wake, consciousness returns, not as a light being switched on, but as a sunrise, gradual, gentle, unfolding. Interestingly, not all unconscious states are alike. During dreaming, especially in REM sleep, the brain can exhibit patterns similar to waking consciousness: visual activity, emotional response, even memory activation. What's missing is the executive function, the rational self-monitoring that gives dreams their strange, unfiltered quality. It's as though consciousness is still running, but without a captain at the wheel. And even in waking life, not everything you do is fully conscious. You walk a familiar path without thinking. You drive while lost in thought. You type a word you didn't mean to, your fingers finishing the sentence before your mind notices. These are not accidents. They're examples of unconscious processing, parts of your mind acting without needing the spotlight. But here's where it gets more interesting. Just because something begins unconsciously doesn't mean it stays that way. You may notice a faint ache. You bring your attention to it. Now it becomes part of your conscious field. You may begin a sentence without knowing where it's going, then find the meaning along the way. The act of becoming aware can shape the thing itself, as if awareness is not just observation, but participation. This supports the idea that consciousness is not all or nothing. It's a gradient, a flow, different levels and layers, some deeper than others, from basic awareness of light or sound to reflective thought to metacognition, awareness of being aware, a hierarchy, not of worth, but of complexity. You're never just on or off. You shift, you change, and that's what makes awareness so hard to define. It's in motion. It's more like wind than stone. Which brings us back to the question, if there is no single place where consciousness lives, what is the you that experiences it? This is perhaps the most delicate realization of all. What you call yourself, your identity, your sense of being, may be the summary, not the source. A story your mind tells about the ongoing process of consciousness. A reflection shaped by memory, language, emotion, gathered into a character that feels continuous, even when it is being constantly revised. In other words, the you that feels like an anchor may actually be a wave, stable only in its flow, and yet that wave is not empty. It holds everything you've ever known, every feeling, every dream, every moment of clarity or confusion. It holds your ability to wonder, to imagine, to listen quietly in the dark. Awareness is not something you switch on like a flashlight. It's something that happens when certain conditions are met, when the brain quiets enough to listen, when thoughts synchronize enough to shine, when a pattern becomes a presence. You don't control it completely, but you are it. And in that gentle understanding, there's no need to grasp too tightly. You can let consciousness be what it is, fleeting, mysterious, luminous. You can let it drift like breath. You can ride its tide like a boat on still water. And when it narrows, when you forget, when you lose yourself in thought or sensation, that's all right too. Awareness is not about clinging. It's about noticing and returning again and again. So, if you're still awake now, floating gently in this quiet thought, take a moment to notice your own noticing, the feel of the air, the sound of this voice, the soft flicker of attention in your mind. This too is consciousness, and you are the space where it happens. You wake up, stretch, and take in the world. Light through the curtains, the hum of a fan, maybe the smell of something brewing nearby. It all feels complete, as if the world has fully arrived through your senses. But what if what you see, hear, smell and feel is not the whole world at all? What if it's just one narrow slice, a thin filter on a much broader reality? You live in a sensory bubble, one that feels vast but is actually limited by biology. The human eye can see only a small band of electromagnetic wavelengths, what we call visible light. But outside that tiny strip lies an enormous spectrum: infrared, ultraviolet, X-rays, microwaves, radio waves, forms of light we can't see, but that flood the universe just the same. To a honeybee, for example, a flower isn't just yellow or white. It glows with ultraviolet patterns, landing strips of light that guide it toward nectar. These designs are invisible to you, but not because they're not there. They're simply beyond the tools your body has for seeing. Your ears too are specialists, not generalists. Humans can detect sounds between roughly 20 and 20,000 hertz. That's enough to hear voices, music, wind, laughter, the rhythms of your life. But a bat lives in a world of high-pitched echoes, hearing frequencies far above your range. Its world is painted in clicks and returns, like a sonar map where solid shapes emerge from empty space. A whale, on the other hand, sings in deep frequencies that stretch for thousands of miles, songs that vibrate through the ocean but fall beneath your threshold of hearing. You might walk through a quiet forest and call it still. A deer would disagree. A bird would hear layers of communication, each call threaded with urgency or ease. A moth might feel the shifting air. A dog might smell what passed there hours ago. The world hasn't changed, just the version of it that's accessible to each being. This idea that every creature experiences only a fragment of reality is captured in a concept called the Umwelt. Coined by biologist Jakob von Uexküll, it describes the unique perceptual world of each species. The Umwelt is not the objective world, it's the useful world, the slice of reality an organism needs to survive. A tick's Umwelt, for example, includes only 3 main stimuli: the smell of butyric acid released in sweat, the temperature of blooded skin, and the texture of mammal fur. That's it. To the tick, the rest of the universe is irrelevant. It doesn't see trees or feel breezes or hear music. Its world is spare, silent, specific. And you too live in such a world. Only yours is filled with human-relevant information. You're tuned to faces, to language, to objects that can be grasped or avoided. Your senses evolved not to detect everything, but to detect enough. Enough to keep you safe. Enough to find food, shelter, companionship. Enough to build tools and pass on knowledge. But not so much that you're overwhelmed. In this way, evolution acts as an editor, not a broadcaster. It doesn't gift you the full picture. It trims the edges, simplifies the inputs, hides the noise. And what remains, the light, the colour, the warmth, the sound, becomes the world as you know it. That doesn't mean your senses are flawed. They are astonishing, exquisite instruments of biological engineering. But they are also selective, shaped by the needs of the body, the constraints of energy, and the slow trial and error of survival. Even vibration works differently across species. Elephants can pick up infrasound vibrations through their feet. Low rumbling messages pass through the ground over miles. You standing beside them might feel nothing. The message is not for you. You are tuned to a different broadcast, and so the Earth becomes not one world, but many, layered, overlapping, nested like invisible Russian dolls. Each species lives inside its own version. The bat in its echolocation, the bee in its ultraviolet maze, the snake in its infrared heat map, the fish that sees polarized light, the bird that senses Earth's magnetic field. Some animals even have senses you don't, like electroreception, the ability to detect electric fields. Sharks use it to hunt. Platypuses use it to probe muddy rivers. You might pass through the same space and feel only water, while another creature reads a whole story there. Electric pulses, hidden movement, the signature of life. This isn't science fiction, it's simply science you're not built to notice, and that, in a way, is its own kind of quiet poetry. Because it means the universe is stranger and richer than your eyes can show you. It means there is more happening always than you can grasp. More signals, more meanings, more dances of energy. It means reality isn't fixed, but flexible, shaped by the observer and their tools. And in this realization, something soft emerges: humility. You don't stand at the center of the sensory world. You stand in a world rich, yes, but partial, meaningful, but incomplete. You're not missing out. You're simply one thread in a vast fabric. The bee's thread is violet, the bat's silent, the whale's deep and slow. Yours is built of breath and light and language, and the quiet rhythm of waking and sleeping. So the next time you pause to look around at a field or a street or the night sky, remember, what you're seeing is not all that's there. It's the version of the world your body lets you hold, and beyond it, beyond the edges of sight and sound, there is still so much more, humming, vibrating, glowing in spectrums you'll never see. But you don't need to see it all. It is enough to know it's there, and to wonder. So far we've explored how the world is wider than our senses allow, filled with colours we'll never see, vibrations we'll never feel, and songs we'll never hear. But what about the world we do perceive? Even within our narrow sensory bubble, the experience of being human is not one size fits all. It is deeply shaped, not just by biology, but by culture, language, and the quiet patterns of the world we grow up in. Your senses may offer the raw ingredients of experience, light, sound, texture, temperature, but your mind is the chef. It selects, combines, interprets, and what it serves back to you isn't just data. It's a curated story, influenced by everything you've learned, everything you believe, and everything your culture has trained you to notice. Let's start with something as seemingly simple as colour. You might think colour is universal. Red is red, blue is blue. But colour isn't a property of objects. It's a perception, created in the mind. And the way we divide the colour spectrum varies across languages and cultures. Some communities have only 3 or 4 basic colour words. Others have a dozen or more. The Himba people of Namibia, for example, group colours differently than English speakers, so much so that they can easily distinguish shades of green that most Westerners can't. To them, what looks like a single colour to you may contain clear boundaries, each one with a name, a meaning, a history. Language doesn't just describe perception, it can shape it. This idea, sometimes called the linguistic relativity hypothesis, suggests that the structure of your language subtly influences how you think, categorise, and even notice the world around you. For instance, in some Indigenous Australian communities, people don't use left and right to give directions. Instead, they speak in absolute terms: north, south, east, west. This means that from early childhood they're constantly aware of their orientation, even indoors, even at night. They navigate the world with a built-in compass, something most of us lose the moment we enter a building. Time, too, is perceived differently. In English and many Western languages, we talk about time as moving forward. The future is ahead, the past behind. But in Aymara, a language spoken in the Andes, the future is described as behind, and the past is in front, because the past is known and visible, while the future is unseen, and therefore behind you. This isn't just a poetic twist. It reflects a different mental model of time itself. Even something as internal as body awareness can be filtered through culture. Some languages have precise terms for different kinds of touch, or types of bodily awareness, a sense of internal heat, or pressure near the heart, or a shadow feeling behind the eyes. These distinctions may not exist in your vocabulary, and so they may not arise in your conscious experience. Not because your body is different, but because your attention is trained elsewhere. The same is true of emotions. While you may recognize fear, anger, joy, and sadness, other cultures identify emotional states that don't map neatly onto those categories. In Japan, for example, there's a word, amai, that refers to the feeling of pleasurable dependence on another's indulgence. It's a blend of comfort, trust, and vulnerability, an emotional state that has no direct English equivalent. Without the word, it's easy to miss the nuance, and once again, what's available to your awareness isn't necessarily what's out there. It's what your brain, through years of language habits and stories, has learned to recognize. Even memory is influenced by cultural framing. Westerners often recall past events with an emphasis on individual agency. I did this. I felt that. In East Asian cultures, memories are more likely to emphasize relationships. Who was present, how the group responded. Same brain, different lens. So what does this mean? It means that your experience of the world, even within your already limited human senses, is filtered through layers of meaning that you didn't choose. You were born into a framework, a language, a rhythm of speech, a way of organizing time, space, emotion. And through this lens, you learn to see, not just literally, but cognitively. You were taught how to look. This isn't a flaw, it's a feature. If we were born into a blank world with infinite data, we'd be overwhelmed. Culture provides scaffolding. It tells us what matters, what patterns to seek, how to survive in a social landscape. It gives us categories, metaphors, habits of thought. It makes reality manageable, but it also hides things. You miss what your culture doesn't name. You overlook what your language doesn't distinguish. You may not realize that you've been walking through a hallway filled with unopened doors, rooms you've never entered, not because they're locked, but because you never saw the handles. And yet, knowing this is not discouraging, it's illuminating. Because it means that your reality, the way you perceive time, colour, emotion, even selfhood, is not the only version available. There are other lenses, other filters, other ways of being, and some of them may even be reachable, gently, with curiosity and practice. You can learn to notice what once slipped by. You can stretch the shape of your attention. You can borrow briefly the eyes of another way of life, and in doing so, expand the edges of your own. This doesn't mean losing yourself, it means enriching yourself. You remain human, but perhaps a more spacious human, one who sees the world not as fixed and complete, but as something always unfolding, full of colour categories you've never used, emotional tones you've never named, ways of knowing you've never needed, until now. So tonight, as you drift towards sleep, let your thoughts widen just a little. Imagine what it's like to see the world in ultraviolet, to navigate by scent, to tell time by shadow and feeling, to know the world through stories that bend space in unfamiliar ways. And remember, you don't see the world as it is. You see the world as your version of human allows, and that's a version worth questioning and gently expanding whenever you can. You've probably done it today without noticing. Maybe someone passed you on the street, eyes down, and you wondered just for a moment what they were feeling. Were they worried, tired, lost in thought? You couldn't have known, not really, but your brain tried anyway. This is one of the most human things about you. Your brain is a social organ. It's not just built to survive in the world, it's built to survive with others, to navigate communities, avoid conflict, cooperate, compete, care. And to do that well, it needs to constantly model the minds around it. That means guessing what others believe, intend, or feel, even if those things are never said aloud. Psychologists call this ability theory of mind, the understanding that other people have inner lives, thoughts and emotions distinct from your own. You developed it as a child, slowly learning that what you know isn't always what others know, that someone else can hold a false belief. That empathy isn't just about feeling, it's about perspective. But the magic of this skill goes even deeper than theory. Your brain doesn't just think about others, it feels with them. When you see someone stub their toe, wince in pain, or light up in joy, your body often echoes the emotion without you choosing to. You flinch, you smile, you tighten your jaw. This phenomenon is partly due to mirror neurons, cells that fire both when you perform an action and when you see someone else perform it. If you watch someone pick up a cup of tea, the motor areas of your brain activate as though you were lifting the cup yourself. It's not imagination, it's simulation. Your body rehearses what theirs is doing, and this simulation happens not just with movement, but with emotion. That's why a yawn is contagious, or why watching someone cry in a movie can bring tears to your own eyes, even though you're sitting in the safety of a dark room. The lines between you and others aren't as solid as they seem. Your brain is constantly blending, mirroring, absorbing. But simulation is not the same as understanding. While you may feel what others feel, you're still guessing. You're still working from the outside in, inferring invisible thoughts from visible signs. And sometimes those guesses go beautifully right. Other times they land far from the mark. You might interpret silence as anger when it's really exhaustion. You might read a frown as judgment when it's simply concentration. You might assume someone is disinterested when they're actually just shy. The problem isn't that you're empathizing. The problem is that your own mind becomes the template. We call this projection, the tendency to assume others are thinking what we would think in their situation, or what we ourselves are unconsciously feeling. It's a shortcut, a way of reducing the overwhelming complexity of other minds by using your own as a model. This is where social reality becomes blurry. You may tell yourself a whole story about what someone thinks of you based on a glance, a pause, a message that didn't come. You may assume motives, assign meaning, build emotional responses on top of nothing but shadows, and once you've built the story, it becomes hard to unbuild it. Because your brain wants coherence, it wants to explain. Even when it doesn't know, it fills in the blanks. And because the story comes from inside, it feels true. And yet, despite these flaws, the system mostly works. It has to. You couldn't function without it. From a young age, you learn to detect sarcasm, anticipate moods, read faces, gauge trust. You may not always get it right, but you rarely fall too far off the mark. This ability is what lets you love, apologize, argue, laugh. It is what makes conversation more than just the exchange of facts. It makes it human. What's remarkable is that this simulation of other minds never stops. You imagine what your friend will say before you text them. You picture how a colleague might react to feedback. You anticipate a loved one's needs before they speak. And when you listen to stories, whether in books, films, or even this very narration, your mind builds characters, motives, feelings. You populate invisible rooms with invisible people and watch them think, feel, choose. It's not just entertainment, it's training. Your brain is practicing being social, even in solitude. And sometimes it extends this simulation to places that don't involve people at all. You may feel that your pet knows something, or that your house welcomes you, or that a machine is being stubborn. This is anthropomorphism, projecting human-like minds onto non-human entities. It's not logical, but it's deeply intuitive. Because your brain is built to expect minds everywhere. It would rather over-detect intention than miss it. This tendency helped our ancestors survive. It helped them cooperate in groups, predict danger, protect young. But in the modern world, it also leads to misunderstanding, especially when we confuse simulation with certainty. So what can you do? Not to eliminate this tendency. It's built in. But perhaps slow it down. Notice it. When you catch yourself making a social judgment, pause. Ask, is this a guess or a fact? When you feel a strong emotion in response to someone, ask, is this mine or something I'm imagining in them? You can't stop the simulation, but you can hold it with more softness. Because at the end of the day, we are all guessing at each other, carefully, lovingly, clumsily. We are mirrors reflecting mirrors, and in that shimmering loop, between one mind and another, something like understanding can still emerge. Not perfect, but enough. Let's begin with a small, familiar scene. You're reading a news article online, something about health, or technology, or maybe a political issue. Halfway through, you find yourself nodding. Yes, you think. That's exactly what I've always believed. It feels good, a kind of mental alignment, a little burst of satisfaction. But here's the strange part. Had the article said the opposite, and if it matched your beliefs instead, you might have nodded just the same. That's not because you're careless. It's because your brain, like every other human brain, tends to seek confirmation, not contradiction. This is known as confirmation bias, one of the most pervasive and quietly powerful mental habits we carry. When we're presented with new information, we're far more likely to notice, believe, and remember the parts that match what we already think is true. Is not a sign of arrogance, it's simply efficient. Reality is overwhelming, so your brain does what it always does. It edits. And while this can make us feel consistent, it can also lead us gently astray. It makes it harder to change our minds, even when we should. It makes disagreements harder to resolve, because both sides feel bolstered by their own carefully curated evidence. And perhaps most importantly, it often hides itself, disguised as just common sense. But confirmation bias isn't the only quiet distortion at work. There's also the curious phenomenon known as the Dunning-Kruger effect. In simple terms, it describes how people with low skill in a certain area often overestimate their competence, while those with high skill tend to underestimate it. This isn't about intelligence, it's about self-awareness. To know how little you know often requires already knowing quite a bit. Imagine learning a new language. At first, you may pick up a few phrases and feel confident. I'm getting the hang of this, you might say. But as you dive deeper, encountering irregular verbs, idioms, cultural references, you begin to realize just how vast and nuanced the language truly is. Your confidence dips. Ironically, that dip is a sign of growth. The more you learn, the more you realize what's left to learn. The Dunning-Kruger effect isn't a judgment. It's a reflection of how the brain builds its own sense of certainty. When knowledge is shallow, there are fewer doubts. As knowledge deepens, so does humility. Another cognitive shortcut is called anchoring, the tendency to rely too heavily on the first piece of information we receive, even if it's arbitrary. If you see a shirt marked down from $200 to $100, it feels like a bargain, even if the true value of the shirt was never $200. Your brain uses the first number as a reference point, and everything after it adjusts accordingly. Anchoring doesn't just happen with prices, it shapes your judgments about people, situations, and risks. If someone is introduced to you as brilliant, you may interpret their future behaviour through that lens. If they're introduced as tricky, you'll likely find evidence to support that too. First impressions matter, not because they're always right, but because they become the lens through which everything else is seen. These biases are not malfunctions, they're features of the brain's architecture, shortcuts that help us navigate a world filled with more information than we could ever fully process. They help us make quick decisions, maintain social cohesion, and build narratives that feel stable. They let us function. But they also create illusions, not of vision this time, but of judgment. We don't just perceive the world with our senses, we interpret it with stories. And once a story takes hold, he's unreliable, I'm not good at this, they're always like that. It becomes sticky. Our brains like coherence. They don't like open-ended threads or shifting explanations. So we gravitate toward ideas that make us feel consistent, even when they're incomplete. This applies especially to our social lives. You might notice someone glancing away during a conversation and assume disinterest. Maybe they're distracted, maybe shy, maybe just tired. But once your brain picks a story, they're bored with me. It begins collecting evidence to support it. It ignores other explanations. It protects the narrative. This is how we build quiet misunderstandings. Not through malice, but through pattern matching, through our deeply human need to explain. We explain ourselves, we explain others, we create meaning from ambiguity. And often, we do it without realizing we're guessing. So what can we do? We can't shut off these biases, but we can slow them down. We can learn to notice them. When we feel certain, we can ask, what am I basing this on? When we dismiss someone quickly, we can ask, what story am I telling about them? And where did that story come from? We can practice cognitive humility, the gentle art of leaving room for doubt, of holding conclusions lightly, of remembering that being human means not just making sense of the world, but occasionally getting it wrong in surprisingly predictable ways. And in this, there is compassion, not just for others, but for ourselves. You're not a flawed thinker. You're a thinker navigating a noisy, social layered world with the best tools evolution could craft. Tools that are fast, powerful, and sometimes just a little off course. But you're here, reflecting. That in itself is a kind of wisdom. So the next time you find yourself judging yourself, another, a moment, take a breath. Ask if there's another angle, a softer interpretation, a pause between reaction and certainty. Because in that pause, reality becomes a little clearer, not perfect, but more open. Try to recall the last story that truly moved you. A novel, a childhood memory, a conversation late at night. Chances are it wasn't just the facts that lingered. It was the way those facts were shaped. A thread was followed. A conflict arose. A resolution came or didn't. But something about the pattern made it stick. It felt complete. Not because it explained everything, but because it connected something inside you. That feeling is not an accident. It is not decoration. It is how your brain is wired. The human brain, perhaps more than anything else, is a pattern-seeking machine. But it doesn't just look for patterns in data or motion or sound. It looks for patterns in meaning, in why things happen, in how things fit together, in what it all amounts to. It doesn't want a list of events. It wants a beginning, a middle, and an end. This tendency shows up early in life. Children don't just mimic adult behaviour. They build stories to explain it. A dropped toy isn't just an accident. It's part of a narrative. The wind knocking over a plant isn't random. It becomes a character with intentions. We tell ourselves stories before we even know what stories are. But this drive toward meaning isn't just about entertainment. It's about survival. Long ago, when our ancestors heard a rustle in the grass, it mattered whether they interpreted it as the wind or a predator. Those who assumed intention, who believed something was there, may have been wrong 9 times out of 10. But the 10th time, they survived. The brain, faced with uncertainty, errs on the side of story. It prefers a false positive with meaning to a false negative without it. That same principle extends far beyond rustling grass. We see faces in clouds, patterns in stars, messages in randomness. We make myths. We follow rituals. We assign significance to dreams and omens and coincidences. This isn't because we're irrational. It's because our minds are meaningful by nature. You can see this in the architecture of culture itself. Every civilization, past and present, has created frameworks to explain why we're here, where we're going, and what matters along the way. These frameworks vary wildly in detail, but they share something profound. They all provide a narrative that weaves individual lives into a larger tapestry. Religion, for instance, is not just a set of rules. It's a story, one that connects your joys and struggles to something beyond yourself. It makes sense of suffering. It places morality in a cosmic context. It binds community through shared symbols. Whether one believes in the literal truth of its claims, the psychological function is clear. It gives shape to the otherwise shapeless. Myths do something similar. Think of the great flood stories found in cultures across the globe. Tales of destruction and rebirth, of punishment and forgiveness, of cleansing and second chances. These stories don't only explain natural disasters, they encode human longings for justice, for mercy, for order restored. They mirror the emotional arcs we feel within. Even in modern times, when religious or mythic frameworks may feel less central, the narrative instinct remains. We build meaning out of milestones, graduations, weddings, retirements. We seek purpose in careers, growth in hardship, symmetry in coincidence. A lost job isn't just bad luck, it becomes the moment I realise what I really wanted. A passing stranger who says something kind becomes part of the day everything shifted. These aren't embellishments, they're how we hold on to life, how we mark it, organise it, and live inside it. This is the gift and the gravity of narrative thinking. It makes memory possible. It gives emotion a direction. It turns time into a thread instead of a tangle. But like all brain processes, it can also mislead. Sometimes we find a meaning where there is none, seeing signs in numbers, messages in misfortune, patterns in noise. This is known as apophenia, or more gently, the brain's way of overfitting. It takes the raw data of life and smooths it until a shape appears, even if that shape was never there. Yet even here, there is something beautiful. Because what this means is that the brain is not just trying to survive, it is trying to understand, to feel connected, to take the chaos of experience and turn it into something that feels whole. It wants to know not just what happened, but why it mattered. And it's not only about the big questions, life, death, purpose, it's about the little ones too. The way you tell the story of a breakup, the meaning you find in a shared song, the way a quiet moment on a rainy morning becomes part of your personal mythology. These small narratives are the threads of your identity. Without them, you are not a blank slate, you are adrift. Meaning is the anchor, and it's not always chosen. Sometimes it emerges. You look back and realise that the thing you thought was a detour was the beginning of a new path, that the pain you avoided was the chapter that taught you who you were, that the ordinary moment was the one you'd return to again and again. Your brain doesn't just want facts, it wants a story that feels true, even if it's made from fragments, even if it changes over time. This isn't a flaw in your perception of reality, it's the reason you care. And in that gentle realization, there's something peaceful. You don't have to chase an ultimate truth to justify your experience. You only have to feel its shape. You only have to notice the thread, and sometimes be the one weaving it. You are living inside a story, not just one written by a novelist or captured in a film, but one that is woven quietly and continuously by your own mind. A story with main characters and background figures, turning points and moments of stillness, with settings that shift and emotions that rise and fall like tides in a book that never closes. This story is not an illusion. It's the way you hold your life together. You may not think of your day as narrative-shaped, but every time you recall something, a conversation, a feeling, a memory from 5 years ago, your mind begins to thread events together. You assign meaning, sense, connection. You remember not just that something happened, but how it happened, and why it mattered to you then, and still matters now. Even when the details are scattered, your mind smooths them with quiet artistry. It adds tone, reshapes light, edits away the noise, not to deceive, but to live. Because this is what the brain does. It builds coherence, and that coherence becomes your sense of self. You're not only your thoughts or your actions, you're the continuity between them, the invisible story that gives your choices context, colours your relationships, and holds your identity together like scaffolding beneath a cathedral. And what's humbling is this: even when we know our stories are constructed, they still feel real, because they are real, emotionally, symbolically, experientially. Think of how a song can return you to a moment, not perfectly, but powerfully. A scent, a texture, a feeling. The memory may be incomplete, but the meaning remains whole. Or how a single word, a glance, or a gesture can linger long after logic says it shouldn't. It becomes part of your inner novel, written in the margins, folded into a chapter you didn't know was still being written. Meaning doesn't need witnesses. It doesn't need to be cosmic to be profound. It only needs to resonate, quietly, personally, truthfully. A moment of stillness, a certain light through a certain window, a phrase you once heard and never forgot. These small moments become luminous inside the private sky of your mind. The psychologist Viktor Frankl once suggested that what we crave most deeply is not pleasure nor power, but meaning. Even in suffering, people search for something that gives shape to experience, something that whispers, "This is not for nothing." The story does not have to be grand. It only needs to hold. And when you begin to notice the story, when you catch yourself seeing yourself, something tender happens. You start to observe how your mind connects the dots, how it stitches emotion to memory, memory to hope. And instead of losing the magic, you gain a kind of reverence for it. It's like standing both inside the painting and beside the painter. You still feel the emotion of the scene, but now you can see the brushstrokes, how memory bends the light, how attention chooses what to frame, how feeling decides which colours to keep. The world doesn't become less vivid, it becomes richer, more honest, more alive. That awareness, gentle and non-judging, opens space. Space to rewrite, to reframe, to soften old stories that wound, or to complete the ones that never found their ending. You begin to realise that the story of your life was never carved in stone. It's sand beneath water, changing with each current, reshaped by every thought, every breath, every act of remembering. Some days your story may feel shapeless, without theme or purpose, but even then narrative is quietly at work. Even wandering is movement. Even stillness has a rhythm. Not every story needs a hero's journey. Some are softer, more like weather than architecture, more like music than maps, and that's perfectly enough. Your meaning doesn't need recognition to exist. It doesn't need structure to matter. It only needs to be felt. Because meaning is not a destination, it's the motion itself. It's how a walk becomes ritual, how a conversation becomes turning point, how a small grief becomes sacred. You don't have to be right about your story, you only have to care about it. And even as you drift towards sleep, your mind continues weaving. Threads of memory, colour, sensation, echo. The story goes on, wordless but alive, unfolding through dreams, through stillness, through silence. And perhaps one day, when you look back, you'll find that even this moment, this quiet, unremarkable evening, became a thread. Not dramatic, not grand, but meaningful. Because you gave it meaning. Because you are the weaver.